So this is going to be a bit of a shorter video. I've been trying to come up with a spellcasting character in Ragnarok, and I didn't want it to be using spells that are old hat, things we've seen before, but in a slightly different way. I wanted to be a spellcaster that's using the Ragnarok itemization and the Ragnarok mechanics, but also I didn't want it to be something that required a lot of gear, so this character is going to be a good starter if you're having a fresh start to Titan Quest. You can choose a character like this, and if you want to play a spellcaster, it's very thematic. And also, since it's a spellcaster, it needs to cast spells. I've been stuck in this way lately where all of my characters become attack-based characters, or at the very least, spellcasting hybrids. But this character should be using 90% of his attacks to cast spells. The remaining 10% might be his throwing weapon, but that's not a big deal. It's not a big source of our damage. And as you can see, he's our secret test lab character. So you'll be able to get a sneak peek, and he's a little bit rootin' tootin', he's a little bit yeehaw. But everyone needs to be who they truly are inside, and for this character, he's a Life Leech caster. Now, I talked about Life Leech before in my defense video, and I did not give it glaring reviews. And of course, we're talking about the X Life Leeched over, let's say, 3 seconds mechanic. In that video, I said that attack damage converted to health was definitely the better leech type, which is true. However, in the past, we have seen some builds, very niche, that utilize flat life leech. The one that comes to mind is throwing knives. And if you didn't know, throwing knives is a very unique spell. It's in the rogue tree. And it's unique because it can actually take flat damage from your jewelry, from your artifacts, and from your relics and charms in your armor slots, and it can add it to each projectile. So what it would do is it would utilize flat life leech in those item slots. It would add it to the projectiles, and then each projectile would seek out its own target, and you could get 5 or 6 life leeches going on at the same time. And of course, those do add together. So you could get a decent amount of health per second out of that. The only drawback is you couldn't use your weapon's flat damage, your weapon's life leech, and add that to throwing knives. It didn't work that way. So this build gets to use its weapon. That's kind of nice. We'll talk about that. But first, let's go over the masteries. So we're using Spirit and Rune Mastery. And what are the spells we're going to be casting? We are a spellcaster. Well, first, Thunderstrike. Spoiler alert, this is how we're using the life leech mechanic. We're also going to be using Seal Fate, and God help me, Life Drain with Cascade. Now, between these 3 spells, and they have relatively short cooldowns, we'll be able to cycle them and get a pretty high uptime on spell casts. It's a pretty skill point heavy build, but that's okay in Ragnarok because the level cap was increased, we get more skill points because of that, and also we get 3 skill points for Act 5 every difficulty you complete it, so we should be able to handle the increased need for skills. So let's talk about Thunderstrike. Well, you've probably tested Thunderstrike yourself if you've played Rune Mastery, but here we have a throwing weapon, and if we were to Thunderstrike with this weapon, it throws 5 projectiles. I'll slow it down here. There it is again, 5 projectiles. Now, each one of those projectiles is actually an instance of your weapon being thrown. And when it hits its target, it applies all of the effects that your weapon does, including its base damage, its modifiers, and of course its relic or charm, whatever you have on it. And that's the damage it deals to the enemy, scaled by the tooltip damage. I think it's 63% here. Yeah, it adds 63%. So it applies its attack damage converted to health, and of course, its flat life leech. And of course, if you have 2 weapons, then you throw 10 weapons, but that's 5 of your left and 5 of your right. So just note, since my right hand weapon doesn't have flat life leech, it of course isn't going to leech life. So for this test, we're just going to use 1 throwing weapon. And what's cool about this mechanic is that if each of these 5 projectiles seeks and hits a unique target, then I can benefit from all of those leeches at once, just like in the throwing knives example. This means conceivably I can take this 100 flat life leech and it can become 500 over 3 seconds if it hits 5 unique targets. That's a bit of an idyllic situation, but it's kind of what we're going for with this build. And that's how it works in theory. Let's see how it works in practice. Oh, and by the way, it's a little bit better than that because we can scale it. So we are using Necrosis, and I'm going to talk about this in our offensive build video, or just general offense mechanics. There's multiple forms of resist reduction. This happens to be the best one. That's all you need to know for the purpose of this video. There's 3 different types of language, but minus X% Y resistance, that's the best form of resist reduction. And it's that way because it's absolute, meaning it subtracts directly from your enemy's resistance, and it can take them into the negatives. If you're a Grim Dawn guru, it works exactly like Grim Dawn. But again, we'll talk about that later. Just know it's good, and it stacks with Aftershock in Runemaster. Of course, Aftershock is one of those things. Its verbiage is X reduced resistances for 4 seconds. You'll probably recognize that from Sapros if you're a veteran, but it stacks with Necrosis. And by the way, if these are maxed out, this is like 50 reduced res, and Necrosis is like minus 100, so that's minus 150 reduced resistances. And the cool thing about Necrosis is it's always up. You don't have to apply it, you just have to walk near your target. So that kind of gives this resist reduction stacking a leg up on a Dragon Hunter, because a Dragon Hunter needs to cast Aftershock and line it up with Study Prey, and that's a bit hard to do. You're likely going to whiff one of those spells and lose a lot of damage. In this one, you just have to cast Aftershock, no big deal. So anyway, oh, and by the way, we can also scale the damage, so Circle of Power gives 100% life leech. Since Anniversary Edition, every time your character levels up, any character, you get 2.5 extra life leech damage per level up. So if you're level 40, that's plus 100% life leech damage, just so you know. So there's multiple ways we can scale this damage to be better than 100. And while I'm on this subject, let's see if this works. I'm going to assume you can see a browser. I really hope so. But I'm here looking at the TQ database, and we are under prefixes, and we've searched for life leech. If we scroll down, we can see bloodthirsty, we can see rapacious, and these are all prefixes, by the way. Ravenous, sanguine, which is the first one, and voracious at level 42, 147 light leaf over 3 seconds. This is the best prefix you're going to find. This is the most amount of life leech you're going to get. And of course, you can still get a suffix. That's not important. Ideally, you'd want one of the green item suffixes like, what is it? Of feasting, those type of things. But of course, we can also put a charm in it. So let's take a look. I'm going to search for Fury's Heartblood. And I'm so happy, by the way, that I can finally incorporate Fury's Heartblood in a build. It's been a long time. I've been trying to figure out a good build for Fury's Heartblood, failed many times. This isn't the way I expected to use it, but it'll do. So you can see here 147 life leech over 3 seconds as a completion bonus. This completion bonus is better than Batfang. It's better than a legendary Batfang's normal completed charm bonus. So in addition to that, you also get the flat 100 vitality, which is insane. So that's a total of 300 life leech over 3 seconds on one item. So if you hit 5 targets, that's of course 1500. If you scale the damage and reduce resistances, that's even more. You get the picture. Let's get rid of this and see what it can do. Now, of course, this is all theory, but I'm going to take it into the field and actually level this character. But for now, let's test the life leech on Thunderstrike. So get a good angle on these guys. So that killed most of them, unfortunately. You can't leech from a corpse, as it turns out. But you can see that second hit, we gained about 35% health. If we can get a decent angle, that wasn't so good, that was about 30%. That was like nothing. And of course we have life drain. So if this has some inconsistencies, we have life drain to back us up. But these angles are really bad, by the way, so we're going to try to take more damage and get a nice juicy example. Ain't working out for us, I guess. The theory is there, all right. And we got about 30-40% on a couple casts. I've seen many times where this will take me up to like, I don't know, 70% health. That's what I'll gain. So there we go. We gain about 80% health with that hit. So if you can hit many unique targets with it, it's a good form of Leech. It is a bit inconsistent, but we have a potion and we have life drain for that. So the theme behind the character, this whole stealing life sort of thing, is pretty good. And consider that this is a pre-made character. It's an accomplished hero. We're only wearing this ridiculous gear. It's not really scaling us at all. So this character is definitely not optimized, not in the very least. So what else do we have going for this build? Well, of course, in addition to scaling the damage and stacking the resist reduction, we also have a nice defensive synergy. So Death Ward. Death Ward is pretty notorious for being very inconsistent. It turns out, if you're at 15% health, you're pretty much dead. A Mackay Archer could easily take you from 30% to 0%, and then guess what? Death Ward will never proc. So in order to make this a little bit more consistent, we have Sacred Rage. Now this starts at 40%. You gain 20% damage absorption at 40% of your health, which is pretty nice. And also you fear enemies away with frightening power. So all those melee dudes are gone. And what you're left with is hopefully a relatively secure battlefield, and maybe you're getting hit here and there. And if that happens to take you to 15%, hopefully Death Ward will proc. So these two synergize pretty well. Sacred Rage gives a little extra leeway for Death Ward, which has a better chance to proc, which could save your life. And of course you have Lich King. Lich King's my boy. He's my favorite summon. You can work in a whole bunch of other stuff. Dark Covenant, Spirit Ward. Now I think the question is still in the air whether this character can handle undead. I'll definitely test it. We'll see. But, you know, I got Circle of Power to scale damage. And we can do mines. I don't think mines are going to be a good idea. I'm considering Rune Weapon. The elemental or the intellect scaling is very, very good. But again, I don't want to make an attack-based character. We'll see. Anyway, if you want to go beyond the theory and see how this character develops, I will be streaming his playthrough live on Twitch. You can find me at twitch.tv/Klex231, CLEX231. If you just want to wait for the YouTube video, of course, once he's past Legendary and I've done everything I need with him, then I will make a build guide for this character and put it on YouTube. You can expect that in the future. But I would appreciate if you stop by the live stream. It helps since I'm starting out if people come by and they're active in the chat and whatnot. But otherwise, hopefully this secret test lab character will bear fruit in the practical world. And until then, thanks for watching.